All right, I'm going to do something here that I haven't done. The last time I did this, I was in the University of Hanoi in Vietnam. And mind you, this is university, and I was in front of the public sector traffic division after lunch. So it was our time to speak. So, and I learned something in a good spirit of Mr. Martin. I don't know if he's still here, but being human after lunch, we got to get our energy up. And several years ago, I went on a date with destiny with a cool guy by the name of Tony Robbins. Anybody heard of him?
Yes.
You know, we don't have a DJ here, but let's just all stand up. Trust me on this one. All the Vietnamese did it, and you got to imagine that picture, okay? Imagine State Public Department Vietnamese in Hanoi. I just asked everybody to stretch. Stretch. Do it your own way. Really, after lunch. After lunch, guys. Just stretch. All right, and I know, I'm sorry, guys, you got to tuck in your shirt again, but we're good. We're good. We're going to have a fantastic panel here, and we have to stretch. You know why? We got stuck with governance, okay? You know, all due respect, it's a lot of fun. AI is a lot of fun, full of innovation. And, you know, now that we're moving from innovation over to accountability, this requirement of governance and what to look for, right? The CTO said, you know, seat belts and speed limits. But how do you even begin? How big of a seat belt, how tight, and how fast? I'm excited to introduce to you here Miss Nita. If you just give a literally 15 seconds, we got this clock against us here. Yes, ma'am.
I've got the timer. Nita Kohli. I've spent my career in financial services, at some of the large institutions. I now operate independently, and I work with C-suite leaders and advise boards on how to implement risk, resilience, and AI safely and securely to generate value and growth.
Thank you so much. Daishi?
Sure. Can you work for me?
Oh, yeah.
Hello?
Karaoke style.
See, it works. Good afternoon. My name is Dai Shi. I spent the last 3 decades in the financial service industry, spent time in both US, mainly New York, DC, as well as in Southeast Asia. In the past 6 years, I've been serving on the board, so I've been playing this dual role. I'm the corporate executive presenting to the board. I'm also sitting the other side of the table, listening to the management presentation. It helped me to really sharpen my skill, both as a board member as well as a corporate executive. I look forward to a great discussion today.
Thank you very much. And Jack, thank you for stepping in to, on behalf of Ms. Yu, who had another occasion here, but you stepped in real quick. We had a quick soundbite with each other. Jack, a little bit about yourself, sir.
Great to meet everyone. Jack Wang here. Spent the last close to 20 years on the investing side of the house, investing in tech services and cyber services businesses for the most part, a little bit of enterprise software. So on the edge of pushing innovation as well as governance between those two things, but looking forward to the conversation.
All right, we're gonna pick on you first here because I know Ms. Yu was more on the investment side. You have a double banger here. You're an operator and the investor. So as we're here to move from theory, right, to what actually works in practice, especially at the board level, from an investor's and board perspective, Jack, what are the clearest signals that a company is truly prepared for AI versus AI washing?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think the reality is that if you don't adopt AI, you're not competitive. It's a little bit more of a necessary or must to adopt AI versus, hey, are you ready for it? And I think there's a couple of things that we're generally looking for in terms of a good, solid AI strategy. One is thinking about the end in mind. what is the business problem that you're trying to solve for, or why? I think a lot of times folks fall into the trap of the what. What are we going to develop? I'd love to build this great product. So I think number one, it's understanding the why, the business solutions. I think the second is really, do you have a detailed product roadmap, KPIs, milestones that you're thinking through, that you can constantly evaluate? Are you on track? Are you actually delivering the business outcomes you're looking for? I think we all know once you develop a product roadmap the next day or the KPIs the next day, it's probably wrong. But I think that allows you to evolve and do better, iterate, and I think AI requires that because it's such a new technology. And I think the last thing is, sitting on boards of portfolio companies, we actually want our teams to push us around AI versus the other way around, because we're more of governance versus necessarily, hey, we want to be bleeding edge, we want the ROI, we want the business outcomes. But I think the thing that we found to be the most successful, based on the handful of data points that we have, is really bringing in new blood, folks who are AI native, who know how to use AI, using AI every single day. They can really help push the envelope and allow us to better understand. And I think the interesting thing is around governance and security is things are going to happen. I think you have to roll the punches. You really need to make sure you're locking down, but your employees and the folks closer to technology are going to tell you where technology is moving. So those are probably the big things I've learned.
Thanks, Jack. So, what I'm hearing here, guys, is without a clear why to an investor, AI becomes very expensive noise. And Jack brought up governance. There goes that word again, right? Miss Nita, here we go. I'm going to put this on you, okay? Where should AI governance live at the board level? And how do we know it's effective without actually slowing down the business?
Something a bit short straw, didn't I? This one. So I do want to share two stats with you before I answer that.
Yeah.
So for those of you who follow NASDAQ, they released a governance pulse survey. I think it was last week, the week prior. Two sort of timely facts. Firstly, 45% of boards have identified the need to enhance their expertise on AI and machine learning. So there's a huge gap there today. And then to sort of give you an indicator on that specific question on where it should sit, over 30% of boards are still discussing that very point. They should have an AI-focused committee, or it should be a task force. So in my experience, right, I think it's less about where it sits and more about the accountability. It needs to be anchored to a primary committee, whether it's risk, audit, and also partner to technology, right, where obviously the core product strategy on AI sits. Full board owns the posture, the strategic posture. Jack, you heard Jack talking about understanding the so what, the why. Does it align to your business outcomes, your strategy, your mission, right? The committee owns the oversight, and then you've got the management team that sort of manages the control plane. And when you talk about how can we, not slow innovation, to me, I'll say very clearly, innovation is a facilitator. Sorry, governance is a facilitator for innovation. The question is, how do you adopt it so that it can scale safely and responsibly?
That's a wonderful answer. Now, despite where it lives, Dai, I need your help here. Keeping innovation alive, okay? Despite where it sits on the board level, from your experience, what is good oversight without crossing the line of micromanagement, right? Well, we're not sure how fast the car is even going right now.
Thank you for that question, because having sat in the boardroom, working with the board, I know a few things what not to do. What not to do is not nose in, fingers in, right? It's nosing fingers out. The trust between the management and the board is critical. And throughout my career, I've worked with very, very strong management, CEOs, executive team. So you have to have that trust, but the board had the duty of care. That's why you always have to maintain that healthy skepticism and ask constructive questions. So what does good look like, right? I would first ask the CEO, the CISO, the CTO, who is accountable for all technology-related risks, not just AI, right? We have business continuity. This is not a new thing. It's been around for many years. There's data privacy, there's IP. We should have one single ownership because today the risks are interconnected. We need that single ownership. And AI is just one new piece of risk that we need to manage. So that's number one. Number two is I would ask management, how is our current insurance policy relates to cybersecurity and D&O? Are AI-related liability covered? If not, what do we need to do? What action do we need to take? Thirdly, you need to look at your current committee charter, whether it's audit risk committee, right, technology committee, finance committee. Does it reflect the AI governance and your AI governance framework? Does the board meeting minutes, which is very, very important, reflect your discussion and decision on AI governance, policy, accountability? And last but not least, if you ever want to be sure that you're doing the right thing, hire a third-party consultant to truly validate your current model vulnerability, any data bias, and just overall feasibility of the current AI framework. That would be greatly helpful. Again, in the spirit of respecting the management, but still exercise the duty of care and fiduciary.
Thank you so much, Dai. Nita, this one's going to come back to you, okay, on a consultant perspective of the board level. Now, let's assume this, right? Something goes wrong. And I know we spoke in the back room about, hopefully it doesn't end up on the New York Times, but should something go wrong, where does accountability actually lie?
So, to me, I would say the business owner, can you hear me? Right, sorry, I'm playing karaoke. Obviously, from that exercise just earlier, I think the business owner truly owns the outcomes. You've got technology that's responsible for the engineering and the reliability. You've got risk and compliance, really, that's responsible for the assurance. And when you say it's the board call, I think it goes back to one of Dai's comments when we talk about accountability. So lining that to your strategy, that think about crisis management frameworks. Who owns what where? And your operating models. The board needs to know, one accountable executive, who do they call in the event of them having clear decisions and escalation paths. This isn't just about AI, this is good corporate governance, really, that we've seen manifest itself over the last 20, 30 years.
Thank you so much. Now, Jack, you heard that, right? I'm going to ask you here, with all that needs to or expected to be implemented, you on an investor's point of view, how important is it for you to actually hear the CEO articulate the why? You brought that up in the beginning. I want to see the importance of that in investors' point of view.
Yeah, I think that is the most important thing. Is you're usually either building products or services to address the business need. And as an investor, we're not really the build it and they will come type. We're more of a, hey, there is a market demand for it. There is a product or a service that has already been proven. And so it always needs to come back to what business outcomes it's driving. And generally the way we assess that is on the product side, we're looking at demos. Does it actually do what it says? Testing edge cases, seeing if the AI actually works the way it's intended to, but nothing's going to be perfect. I think the second thing is we're generally looking at actual simple business outcomes, and maybe I'll just use an example. One of my old portfolio companies, Business Owned Notion Health, what they did was they provided denial services. So you go to a hospital bills the insurance company, the big bad insurance company says no, we're not going to pay this bill. Notion then goes and says, okay, let me collect the data, let me appeal that bill for you. Let me try to get that money so the hospital can get paid. And what we actually ended up doing, and it wasn't actually that expensive, is we hired a great SVP of product who was very AI forward. She hired one other person and then a couple of developers, a SWAT team of maybe 3, 4, 5 folks, with a business goal in mind of how do you automate that? How do you make a claims person do 5, 6, 10 claims a day versus just 1 or 2? And so that was the business outcome, the KPI that we're tying this solution to, and we started iterating on that. At first, it didn't add that much additional efficiency or capacity. Over time, that got better, but I think it's that iteration with an end in mind and the KPIs along the way that is really helpful in terms of thinking through the efficacy of what we're spending.
KPIs are important for measurements and value. Dai, I'm going to come back to you on this one, okay? Myself, I'm still a hybrid operating a smaller tech company, right? Where I report to the board, and I'm also chairing this board at the same time. And we're also needing to impress the investors out there with technology and how we operate. Tell me, how should board evaluate whether AI investments are actually creating value, right? Versus just adding cost to the CEO's perspective and complexity to the operation. How do you look at that?
So first of all, David, I met you. I thought you're very impressive. So, you're on the CEO side, being on the board side. I think the question here is that healthy skepticism that I mentioned earlier. The board will evaluate AI investment as the same rigor as any other strategic investment. I have to start with the why we talked about earlier. Board will ask the question, what are we solving? Do we have elevated operating expenses, or we're seeing revenue deteriorating? What are we solving, number 1? 2 is, how is it aligned with the strategic objective, near term, midterm, long term? If you're publicly traded company, how is it aligned with the message you deliver to the market and the analyst and your investor? Secondly, I will ask how we evaluate alternative options. Yes, AI investment, could we do it differently? Because every dollar investing in AI is competing with the other use of capital. For example, dividend payout, shares buyback, M&A, reinvest in the business, or any other normal technology upgrade. So you're competing with other use of capital. So the board rose to make sure whatever decision we make, we're standing behind it because it gives us the highest risk-adjusted return, and that is board role. Thirdly, now that we got that two squared, right, now we can look at the business case. Does it meet the internal hurdle rate? A lot of companies said RRR 15%, 20%, whatever have you, and how is it aligned with your market guidance? You need to look at the impact on the P&L balance sheet, right? You could use dollars to pay down debt, or if you take a debt to finance AI, that's even more concerning. And how is it impacting your free cash flow? That's a big parameter a lot of the public companies under scrutiny with. Then you need to challenge the assumption. What are the key assumptions that make or break this business case? Have we done stress tests? Macro environment, geopolitical impact, anything could have a negative impact on this particular business case. So the board need to ask these type of questions. Now, if you're still satisfied after all of that, congratulations. Then we need to talk about adoption, right? So deployment, we launched the AI tool, great, we invested it on, did your customer use it? What's the adoption rate? Have you seen any behavior change? Have you seen any financial indicator that suggesting this is working? Because if you launch the AI, if it's not driving behavior change, it's not going to deliver the result that you're expecting. And last but not least, we need to be able to scale. If you're not scaling, you're not getting a return. And while scaling, carefully manage all the risks that my panelists have mentioned. There's data, there's security, there's IP issue, the third-party vendor risk, there's bias, there's harmful output, you name it. A lot of risk you need to manage carefully and have a defined framework, working with the management to work on that defined framework. So follow those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps.
There's maybe two things I just want to add in to.
Please, yeah, there's lots of discipline involved here right now.
It's interesting though when we say that, because when we talk about boards, I think it sort of backs into what you were saying about framework. We all know there's going to be near misses with AI. Fact, right? We're moving rapid speed. So it's important to have a culture where there's transparency on your near misses, and that you've got lessons learned. Understand what didn't work, what worked, what do we do differently as we go forward. That's part of the AI, this is part of our feedback loop, our evolution. And then secondly, when we talk about boards specifically, now we do a lot of, I've come from a highly regulated industry, as some of the other speakers this morning. And we're familiar with scenario analysis. We've done that for years around financial risk. But what we need to really do is really pull these emerging risks together, the confluence of risks, and think about those what-if scenarios and simulate those with the board. AI is another transformational shift, right? And how it manifests itself across an organization. So thinking about those scenarios, right? How do they, geopolitical, are we impacted? What's the impact of supply chain? AI, how is that impacting our value proposition, right? Our mission, our strategy. It's really thinking about those top 3, 5 scenarios that are going to be plausible, and you can really stress them to the point of severity. You can't solve every scenario, but having a clear view on at least the top 3 things that may impact you, being able to stress them, I think is part of that journey of learning and being able to mitigate some of those risks as you go forward in this transformation.
Very well. Jack, you mentioned KPIs, and usually without metrics, there's no discipline. Tell me from your experience, what's the first sign of something not working? Given the efforts that we're all talking about here on stage right now, what's the first sign of something not working?
Yeah, I'm just thinking through that. I think it's really interesting because you set out the KPIs. Let's just say you set the KPIs aside. Yep. It's actually usually not that hard to tell when something's not working. It's the product is not doing what it's meant to do. You're getting customer complaints because of X, Y, Z.
Love it.
You're getting governance issues with data not being managed the right way. I think you see a lot of those things along the way in terms of either your own employees saying, "Hey, this is not working. This is not that's not making me more efficient." Or your customers saying the same things. I think you can really measure it that way, and then, of course, when it comes to the actual P&L, you're not seeing the results, and you're spending a lot of money. And sometimes there's I've spent 3 times more than I anticipated I'm going to spend. What is going on? We're not getting kind of the results.
Very good. And Jack, I apologize. I tossed that on you there because I want to bring forth something. You're a true technologist here. And ladies and gentlemen, technology is so simple. It either works or it doesn't. Isn't that true? And when implementing AI, same way, measuring value. Now here's another creepy question, and this is going to be opening up to all panelists here, okay? One of the biggest risks is shadow AI, right? Tools being used across the organization without formal approval. How should boards think about this? Now before you answer, I'm a dude that actually allows this right now because we are learning as we go. And there's so many tools that if you don't figure it out, that's your problem. You're going to be behind. Now, given that as a fact, the operating CEO, my fellow board members, where do we go from there, right? Let me rephrase that so you have this here. How should the board think about that shadow AI? How do we manage that, if we do at all?
I think the natural reaction is there's a risk, we have to shut it down. But I would say take a step back, we need to manage it. There is serious operational risk and financial risk associated with shadow AI. I won't repeat all those risks we highlighted before. But board should challenge the management to ask the question why we're seeing shadow AI. I know employees using between ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, and DeepSeek in the same day. Why? Because they're seeking the optimal outcome and product and the answer. So what shadow AIs, when they surface, it actually signals there's some unmet demand, right? If our existing tool is not delivering the result and the productivity that the teammates is expecting, we're potentially missing the upside. So the board would challenge the management to say, channel through this shadow AI phenomenon, find out why, and capture the upside, but put it in the enterprise, the governed, controlled environment, so you actually contain the risk. In the meantime, you capture the upside on the productivity.
Thank you so much. Now, Jack, hearing all that with the shadow AI, and you not knowing as an investor how anybody's managing it, how does that factor into an investment risk for you?
Yeah, I think the reality with AI risk is that, and shadow AI is that you're going to have it. So to Dai's point, how do you manage it? And talked a little bit about this maybe in the opening, but I kind of liken it to back in the day, public cloud with shadow IT. Like, oh, you're not on our servers, how dare you? Now everything is out in ether, right? Today, public cloud is very standard across most enterprises, most companies. And so I think it's about how do you manage dynamically as your folks are telling you, hey, here's new technology that's going to make us better. Here's new technology that's going to make us more competitive. And so it's how do you manage those risks as they come in versus how do you block out everything? Because the reality is, I'm sure a lot of you guys have read this, all the research around ethos and Anthropic, it's pretty scary what's going on there. There's, within a very short period of time, that new algorithm basically found hundreds of very critical cybersecurity vulnerabilities that have been there for decades. And now with AI, it's no longer 2 or 3 years where it takes a bad actor to actually develop a strategy, attack vector, get in there, infiltrate, exfiltrate all your data, lock it down. It takes them 20 hours. So I think blocking everything out is a very hard thing to do. I think being more dynamic and making sure that you're blocking down the things that your folks are using is a much better approach to it.
Thank you, Jack. Whether we block it, stop it, or think about it, Nita, your clients today, as you're out there in practice, what controls actually work?
So I actually love the example that Jack gave. He talked about AWS, and I shared this upstairs. I think 10, 15 years ago, lots of organizations were like, let's go to the public cloud, we need to get off prem, right? So they went sort of full cloud strategy. Today, the conversation is now hybrid, right? Need to really put things back on prem, think about that critical data. It's a matter of understanding your risks and being able to tier your risks, right? And put in a tier-based sort of governance. When I think about shadow AI, it's inevitable. So it's more about the question of how we bring it in safely and visibly. So when I think about how do we do that, the way I sort of approach this with some of the clients I talk to is provide a safe path, right? Approve some tools in a secure environment. So if your employees do manual workarounds, we all play around with all the AI tools. Set some guardrails, right? Data classification rules, what can and can't be entered. I think the biggest risk that we're all concerned about is data and the loss of IP, right? Security, right? So we're aware of some of the unintended consequences, so let's put some guardrails in place. And then something we've talked about up on this panel is instrument and monitor. Put in some use your internal telemetry, look at some of the metrics that you have and control, and detect some of the shifts that will help identify misuse early. So again, it goes back to don't have an aversion to it. It's inevitable. It's there. Embrace it. Just put some guardrails in place.
Gargoyles.
Go ahead, gargoyle.
You're scaring everybody away. Thank you so much, Nita. It's true. Okay, Ms. Dai, I want to ask you something here. On a board level, and what you're hearing here from the CEOs and executives and operations, do most organizations actually know where AI is being utilized?
It's a great question. I actually had this conversation with one of the executive directors that I work with. Like, I want to see a list of all the AI use cases within the organization, not just the beginning. Who's using it? Who's accountable for it? What are the typical risks associated with using that particular AI, and how do we mitigate it? That gentleman admit there's a list, but not necessarily has the rest of it, and I'm asking. And I think that's the board job to say, hey, you know the risk, where does it live, who's accountable for it, what's the mitigation plan, what are the scenario planning? Ask that additional questions. And every board member should know as well.
Yeah.
And another thing I think, Rita, you mentioned, there's, at the board level, there should be accountability, managing the AI risk, governing the AI risk. I would say, at the board level, agree with the management that at what point the alarm should sound, and not wait until the next quarterly board meeting, right? That's number one. Number two is, in the event of the extreme scenario, you get a cyber attack, you got a data breach, you got a ransom, you got an outage. Who do you immediately escalate to? Who on the board do you talk to? Do you talk to the board chair? Do you talk to the audit risk chair? Do you talk to the technology chair? Agree to that in the beginning, because things will happen and you only have split second to make decisions, and you need to agree on that.
And I think that just goes back to, I think I bring it back down to having a good playbook or crisis management plan in place, that in the event of a disruption, whether it's AI, whether it's geopolitically charged or otherwise, who are you calling, who's accountable, what's the escalation path and the decision, right? So going back to first principles on how to manage crises.
A lot of companies conduct tabletop exercise these days. That's helpful. The reality could still be different, but having that rigor and kind of discipline is helpful as the foundation.
You know, as I listen to the panelists here, what's really happening is, and of course, Dai is asking the CEO for a list. You know, all CEOs, you better be ready there. That list, how do you know you have it all on the list for her, right? But I think the biggest underlying risk here is not technologies or tools that's already been approved. It's what's running underneath that we don't know about. That's where the risk exists at this point. I've got a fun one here for us. You know, I operate in 5 different countries, and I know you've supported, you've had your companies and your supporting boards in multiple global geographical locations. So with fragmented global regulations, you know, GDPR, the European Privacy Act, we here in America are starting to pick up on that as well. How should boards approach this? Do we build at the highest standard, or stay more localized and agile? You know, think global, act local, right? Where do you stand on that?
I would say there's right or wrong to the answer. There's pros and cons of each approach. The board role is really having that tough conversation with the management to how do you balance growth versus risk control. I work for AXA. A lot of you know the company operates in US, Asia, Africa, Europe, right? You're typical geographic and it has its own unique characteristic when it comes to AI governance and the maturity of the AI governance. In Europe, you hold the highest standard. There's EU Act, there's GDPR. There's no negotiation there.
Yeah.
US is quite fragmented, but catching up very, very quickly, California being a pioneer. So if you hold the highest golden standard and apply in the US market, you give yourself some runway that have good coverage. Now, Asia, particularly China, has a state-led AI governance. Price scrutiny, passed new law in 2026, higher fine for cyber violation, and put AI governance into law and strict scrutiny on cross-border data transfer. So you want to think about localization of your AI governance in China, particularly. Also be mindful of the operating costs associated with that. You have to build a local data cloud. That's dollar. One-time implementation, ongoing carry costs. Before you enter the market, you really have to think through what's the business case on that. And last but not least, Africa. It's still at the early stage, but accelerating very quickly. The requirement is low, but just because the requirement is low on governance doesn't mean your standard should be low governance. You have to implement some of the non-negotiable governance criteria, right? Data privacy, no bias, ethical using, these are non-negotiable. So I'll summarize. The board role is really have that tough discussion with the management in balancing risk versus growth and pick a model that works best for your particular company.
Thank you, Dai. Now, despite the models, Jack, as the tech investor, okay, put that hat on back on for me here. Is over-compliance a good long-term investment?
Yeah.
Or a slowdown? Let's just be real here as tech guys. You know, sometimes compliance just slow us down. What do you think?
That's true. I think part of their job to make sure that you're safe. You know, I think maybe the way I think about the question is, even though we're investors, we also sit on boards. We also have fiduciary duties to our own investors and our LPs. And so, can I stare my investors in the face and in the eyes and say, hey, look, we did everything we possibly could to make sure that this didn't happen? I think that's a level of standard that you have to hold yourself to. Look, the reality is in cyber, something's going to happen no matter what. I think that's inevitable. You do the best, but the attackers are always going to be one step ahead of you. It's their job to do so. And so I think you could just, with that mindset, hopefully you put in the right approach as to how much you need versus what innovation is. That being said, we're always trying to push innovation. So we're always trying to move really, really quick. There are some non-negotiables, data governance, things like that you have to be very, very careful around. But I think that's maybe the mindset you gotta hold.
So long term is okay? It's good for long term?
I think so. I think you have to have it in place.
All right, I've just been flagged on timing here, so I'm going to have to push this thing, okay? But I think summarizing this is regulation should now be a design, right? And by design, rather than just thinking of it as part of compliance. So designing the technology is key. Guys, help me out for the audience. Rapid fire, okay? Just a couple questions. Anybody can answer. First one speaks wins, okay? What's the biggest red flag? Guys, what's the biggest red flag when a CEO presents AI?
I would say CEO come to the board saying, you know what, our competitor's doing it, gotta catch up. That's the worst kind of presentation. It's a photo, right? Not
You're right.
with a wide validation.
You're right. And Jack, why is she right? She's without the why, we suck, right?
You gotta have the why, exactly.
Okay, another one. Nita, help us out here. What's the one question, and you're practicing the field right now, what's the one question every board director should be asking?
Let me ask you all, which are the most material use cases that you've got that impact our customers, our clients?
I would ask bluntly, How do you identify and manage all the risk that is associated with the product? And I'd like to hear the honest answer.
Maybe the last thing is just the frequency of when you ask that question. Every board meeting, every interaction, you should be asking it because AI changes so fast. If you don't ask every single time, you'll be left in the dust.
I want to thank every single one of you, but then I really don't want to thank you because once my board listens to you, now I'm going to be asked for a list, I'm going to be asked for all kinds of things right now. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time. We had a great group of folks here and time's up. Thank you so much.